A billion years to rise from the earth. The rich can't tell you what you're worth. Their false gods cast their spells on you. Can't reach the stars because rent is due. Break the chain, break the chain. Oh, how you guys doing? Matthew, Azron, that guy, an absolute pleasure. An absolute pleasure. I woke up stupid early this morning, too early, because of my dog. I have my little dog. He's right here. Uh, but I went to the gym, worked out a lot, uh, tooled about, downloaded Midjourney. Midjourney is an AI art generator. It is the end of we're doomed. Like we're doomed, right? Eat your vitamins and say your prayers. Yeah, exactly. No, it's good. It's good. Going to the gym is good. It's it's good for the soul, I think. It's good for just like you face your like I say on this channel a lot, right? I say on this channel a lot. The hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. Well, when you're at the gym, you're dealing with yourself and dealing with your limitations and dealing with the realities of what it is to be in this human body, this meat shell that we all inhabit, that we're all walking around in, pretending like this is normal. This is a normal thing that we're all normally just walking around. Yeah, everybody's just an ape walking around, right? It's normal, right? We're all just doing our best. And then I got some hot wings, which was really lovely. Yeah, Wednesdays equal half price hot wings, apparently. That seems to be like a universal truism now. I'm seeing it everywhere. I literally walk down the street. I'm just like Wednesday half price hot wings, half price. It's like the universe decided collectively all together all at once. And lo, Wednesday shalt be the day upon which we shall have the half price hot wings. And the half price hot wings shall be AI literally deleting the relevance of my art skills. Eggsy, I'm gonna give you like the tiniest little glimmer of hope. Uh, which is that as I've been working with this AI, and to be fair, I've only been working with it very briefly. It seems like it doesn't understand. Like it's really good if all you really want is like John Wick in the rain. Like if you just want a picture of like John Wick and it's raining and he's sitting beside his dog or something, right? And you don't care anything else. It doesn't seem to really understand nuance or detailing very well. And I'm sure that there's going to be some kind of workaround. Like even as I'm talking about it, there's like a Photoshop thing that I can think about where you select a section of the photo and then you can like manipulate it a little bit better. But it does seem to me like the AI, yeah, for now, like if I type in like give me a wizard smoking a pipe and stirring a cauldron, it just doesn't seem to understand the like it's like pipe cauldron. And like maybe you get the pipe and maybe you get the cauldron, but you'll never get both. And it's just like it just seems to like fritz out in terms of detailing, and it doesn't seem to understand like details. Doesn't do really well with details. It does really well in terms of like taking a bucket and throwing a bucket against a wall. Uh, uh, which like I think that it will be really useful for just like splash art, if you understand what I mean. Like if you just want like an image, right? Like if you just want an image. But I don't think it can tell a story. Like, I don't think that there is a way for it to successfully, like, I think that by the time you actually get an AI to manifest what you need for a cohesive story, I think a well-skilled artist will simply be able to produce it faster. I really think that that's true. Like, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna iterate a picture over and 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 over again. And I think that's really good if all you need is like a splash. If all you need is like a cover, right? If all you need is like an album cover, all you need is like a Magic the Gathering card, right? If what you're looking for is just like splash grab, right? So like a poster on a bus, right? Like that kind of thing. But if your goal is to actually create or see a sequence of events, right? A sequence of story events, I just think that perhaps AI will be able to expedite the process, and that skillful designers and creators will know how to use AI in terms of integrating it into their work, right? But I think that will be seen as we move forward. That will be seen as a skill in and of itself, and that will be skillfully done. And skillful creators will know how to really augment this and really manipulate it in such a way so that they get what they want and are able to tell like a cohesive story with it. In a way, so I don't think the human element is ever going to be eliminated, right? I don't think you're ever going to have just some executive asshole typing into a computer, make me an Ant-Man movie, and that being successful in any way, shape, or form, right? I think that you still will need creators, you still will need this kind of stuff. We have a guy by the name of the Hidden Scotty saying, still think AI needs a lot of regulation. I think there's a lot of questions, right? And the issue that I see, the major issue that I see with AI is how it intersects with capital, right? That's the problem. Like, if everybody's needs were taken care of, if people weren't producing art for money, if this wasn't considered a job, right? If this was just a pursuit, something that we did because it was interesting and fun and creative and lovely, then I don't think there would be a problem. That AI only gets really kind of fucky from a like robotics perspective of like, is this thing going to come to life and destroy us kind of thing, and like that those kind of conversations, like the militarization, the military applications for artificial intelligence, which are already in use in the Gaza Strip, right? They're already using AI for military purposes, unsuccessfully, incidentally. They're showing that AI knows how to do a lot of damage, but like that's not new, right? The Nazis bombed the shit out of Stalingrad. They knew how to do it, right? It doesn't mean you can win a war with it. But in terms of like the artistic creation, the use of AI as an artistic tool, it is going to render a lot of it's going to make a lot of, like, I don't know why, if you were making like Magic the Gathering cards, it's just the example that just is constantly jumping into my head. Whenever I'm using this, I'm literally like, this is just like Magic the Gathering cards. Like any of these pictures that I'm generating right here, you could use for a Magic the Gathering card, right? And so that's the end of all those artists. I don't see like literally any asshole, some fucking intern who they're paying like a base minimum wage job could just punch this stuff into Midjourney and create an infinite array of Magic the Gathering cards. So yeah, it's going to generate unemployment for sure, and it's going to, but like we don't have any marble workers anymore. You know what I mean? Like that there's I understand that there is this inclination to be like, oh, woe is me, the art will be lost into the annals of time, and oh, the art form will become not so useful. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's not new. Like, not only is it not new, it's like, I feel like that is how human society evolves and moves forward, right? Always. That like the era of marble working occurred and we have it and there it is and we don't do it anymore because it's not it's not the central litmus. It's not how we articulate ourselves artistically any longer. We do other things and we move in other directions and we do other stuff. And the if it wasn't for the intersection with capital, if it wasn't for the fact that people starve, right, and it creates a lot of desperation because people are suddenly like, oh no, my skill set that I've trained my whole life for is no longer sellable on a market. How do I pay my rent? If it wasn't for that dynamic, then I think the people who like, then really it would be not seen too much differently from just a fad, right? Just like a fad that for a period of time, this is how humanity expressed itself artistically, and that the zeitgeist of humanity was entranced by that artistic articulation. But eventually the zeitgeist moves on, and the zeitgeist basically just says, we're no longer interested in this articulation. It doesn't matter how skillful you are at it. Doesn't matter how well you can craft like a Michelangelo's David. We don't really care that much anymore, right? Like we did it, check mark. We got it, right? Like if you were to create like a Michelangelo like painting today, nobody would give a fuck, right? Because it's been done and we've got it and we've seen it. We all know how skillful it was and we all know how long it took him to do and all of that kind of stuff, but we did it. And so the zeitgeist wants to move on, and it does move on, right? Yeah. At best, I'll still need to put in 5 times more effort to produce worthwhile work. Like it's, again, my feeling is that there will be an intersection that creators, especially creators that are learning now, like it's different for people who like learned a skill and then have to go back and like start to pick up afterwards. Like the new generation of artists are literally walking into AI. They're just walking into it. And they're straight up just going to be like creation with AI. They're going to be like cyborgs in that way. They're just going to go right into it. And it's unpredictable as to what can be done. And I've said it several times, and I'll say it again. If it wasn't for the intersection with the arts in capital, I think that our complaints would be philosophical at best. That the only reason it's actually a serious conversation is because people need to eat. And if you've based your entire living and the entire way that you actually get your food off of selling your art and your skill, right? Then this is a disaster. And I mean, capitalism is a disaster, right? There's a climate crisis in the world. It's a disaster, right? Kennedy Care TV. We got a lot of people who just came in on Twitch. Good to see you guys, right? Good to see you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. Yeah, and the Hidden Scotty, like you're free to disagree. If somebody makes a high level piece of art, like you will pay attention to it. Not many other people will. That's what I mean when I say like the zeitgeist. Like it's not like it's not like the number one thing. Like it's there are still people who do sculptures, high level sculptures, really excellent sculptures, right? Maybe even rivaling the sculptures of the ancient Greeks when they were at their peak. Right, and the ancient Romans, when they were at their peak. There are people producing sculptures today on that kind of level. You don't know who they are. You've probably never seen their work, right? If you have, it's been this kind of like neat, click, move on, right? It's not the center of the culture. It's not like Taylor Swift is like highlighting this sort of skill and exists in this kind of thing. Like Taylor Swift is the center of the culture, right? Like that's the truth. Yeah, $1.90 per day is out of poverty according to capitalists. Yeah. well, according to capitalists, you should work for free. And you're lazy if you don't want to. Yeah, capitalism pushed those people into poverty in the first place. Don't get me wrong. A little bit of capitalist thinking is fine, but not too much. I mean, I think that we should place barriers around basic necessities. That we should say straight up that basic necessities are off limits. That we should create public systems that say food, shelter, air, water. These things are off limits. You do not get to operate in the capitalist mindset when it comes to food, shelter, and healthcare, right? Like, we figured it out for healthcare, but like we need to extend it to food and shelter and basically just say outright, no, you don't get to withhold these things, right? You don't get to compete for these things. These things are provided. Like, it's insane. It's insane to believe that food and shelter should be withheld from people in exchange for their labor. That's an insane way to think. It's manic. Like, it is psychopathic, and it's just built into the fabric of the society that we are able to stand up and like that a single individual in the society is able to stand up and say, yeah, you should pay me for food that I don't create, that I don't distribute, that I have nothing to do with any of the parts of the system outside of the fact that I own it. I have a piece of paper that says I own it. And so I'm able to siphon away billions of dollars, like billions and billions and billions of dollars in profit for myself. And if you don't actually work for me or someone exactly like me, then you are free to starve, right? Like that's manic. That's an insane worldview of a psychopath culture, and there's just no reason for us to tolerate it at all. I mean, money is technically unlimited. You can't do that because inflation is real, and it is true to say, like, if you have unlimited money, then money has no value, right? Because money by itself isn't the thing that actually has value. It's the item that has value. It's the labor that you put into value, into the item. It's human time and effort, right? Like, if it takes me 1 second to make a bowl of chili, right? If I can just go and there's a bowl of chili, right? Then I can sell it very cheaply. But if it takes 10 hours to make a bowl of chili, then you have to sell it at a higher price, right? Because it takes longer to generate and longer to create. And if it takes me 10 hours to make a bowl of chili, it might be so high that nobody's willing or able to pay for it. We have a housing crisis right now because we're unable to build housing to keep up with demand. That's not really what's going on. And I mean Male Rights USA, so it's a very kind of right-wing sort of a name. I don't want to assume things about you, but I love this narrative. I absolutely love and adore this narrative that says out loud in front of everybody that capitalism is incapable of predicting and keeping up with supply. Right? The capitalists themselves are admitting this to your face. That they're saying it straight up. Like, we don't have enough houses. So the capitalists are outright confessing to you, we failed completely to address the basic issues of society building. We didn't build enough housing. Right? Oopsie-doo, this capitalist free market system is completely incapable of actually generating the necessary items for human survival. And they're just confessing it to you. And the reason why they confess that to you, because it is part of it, capitalism is a failure along those lines. But capitalism is also a failure because while they are simultaneously failing to build new housing, they're also failing to tell you that they're hoarding houses, that places like BlackRock organizations like BlackRock, Vanguard, Sixth Street, and individuals like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates are just hoarding houses. They're just, in some markets, new housing development is purchased by private investors as high as 60 to 70%. So all new housing is essentially getting bought up by these investors, and the investors are buying up new properties. It's why housing is skyrocketing, right? Because they're tightening supply while simultaneously pulling empty properties off of the market, right? And for a lot of these guys, they're not actually interested in turning them into rentals, because that's a big pain in the ass, and you don't really get a big income flow when you're dealing in the billions of dollars strata. That for them, they are just transferring their liquid capital, their money that isn't actually worth anything. Money isn't real. It's an intangible kind of promissory note, right? And so they're taking their huge sums of that are just sitting in offshore accounts, doing nothing. Some banks are literally beginning to create negative interest rates, which is actually chewing away at people's fortunes as they just sit there. And so what they're doing is they're taking their vast sums of wealth, their billions of dollars of exploited labor that they took from us, and they're buying up properties, which is driving housing prices through the roof, because you can't get access to these things because Jeff Bezos owns them all, because Sixth Street owns them all, because Vanguard owns them all. And the capitalist class isn't willing to confess this. It's such a dramatic and egregious sin that the capitalist class would prefer that you think of them as a complete and total failure in terms of their ability to produce housing. They don't want you to know that they are purposefully withholding housing and pulling it off the market on purpose in order to make you homeless. Because if you figured that out, then you would go, oh, take the houses away from them. Get the houses away from these overt, crazed, manic psychopaths and put people in the houses, right? That's the actual solution. That we stand up and say, yeah, you get 2 properties and then you're done. Oh, you want a 3rd property? That'll be 100 trillion, infinite sum of money. So high and vast that it will impoverish you and your family for generations. You want that 3rd property? That's what you'll do. Oh, you don't want that 3rd property? Okay, cool. Then a family gets to buy it. Fuck off. And that's the real solution. But as long as the capitalists keep you hyper-focused on this idea that we just need to wait for the capitalists to solve this by building more houses that they in turn will buy, right? Literally their surrogates, the political class, are standing in front of you saying, what we're going to do is tax you. What we're going to do is tax you. We're going to get you, the taxpayer, you, to deal with this crisis, you, to pay your taxes so that we, the surrogates of capital, will build housing, which, who buys that? The capitalists. So when you pay your taxes, you are paying for capitalist assets to be bought. That's what's actually going on. And then you turn around and say, yep, better just wait for the capitalists to build more housing. They failed to build and confess to my face constantly. And the reason why they're willing to confess that overt, crazed failure is so that you'll never glom onto the fact that they're literally withholding the housing off the market in the first place. And all we'd have to do is stand up and say 2 houses per person, full stop. Full stop. 2 houses. You want a 3rd property? Fuck you. And that would end it. That would crater the market immediately. It would solve the housing crisis. It would solve everything. And all it would do is make a small handful of psychopaths go, meh. And that's it. We'd have an article, we'd have 10 articles come out of the National Post being like, the reason why homelessness is good, actually. The reason why you should allow me to own 20,000 more houses. It makes sense that one person owns the entire state of Vermont, actually. Right? And then that would end and we would all go, yeah, the Nazis had things to say. See, you're one of these guys, male rights. They want you dependent. Here's the quote. They want you dependent on the state and whatever the state gives, they can take away. Also, the idea it will be free is a myth. It will be paid with taxes. See, you're one of these guys who has separated in your mind. You've created this myth of government, right? You've created this separation in your mind that there's this entity that exists in a total vacuum, that is separate completely, in living in some alternative reality, that is a creature and a monster that feasts upon you, called the government, right? You haven't actually connected in your mind the reality that the government is owned by capitalists. So you're one of these guys who refuse. You'll say that the solution is private capital, right? The solution is private capital, and we just need to privatize more, in fact, and we just need to actually let the free market decide, right? We don't worship chaos. This isn't a chaos theory. No, free market. Invisible hand, even though Adam Smith's only reference to an invisible hand was to disparage people with it, and this idea, and that it would spread disaster in the society, which is exactly what it's done. That what the government actually is, right, is beholden to the capitalist class. So those people who you want to privatize the system for, right, the owners of the society, they use the government. They buy politicians, right? And if you go after the government in order to deregulate so the private market can decide, well, then you're just doing the work of the ownership class. They're just happy as a clam about that. They don't want rules. They don't want to pay attention to rules or regulations or any of that kind of stuff, right? They want to enslave you, right? That's what they want. They want you to be beholden to them. And when they hear you say things like, I don't want to be beholden to a state, I'd prefer to be beholden to a rich CEO who is going to literally enslave me, they're tickled pink. They're tickled pink about that. It blows me away that libertarians, people who call themselves libertarians, are clamoring for their own enslavement. That's exactly their position. Their position is, let's dismantle the only apparatus that exists to theoretically respond to us and empower people who literally enslave other people today so that we can work for them. That's the libertarian position in a nutshell. It's baffling. It's baffling that people go along with it. It's baffling that people want to do it. And what's the solution? What's the actual solution? To chase the capitalists out of the conversation completely. To say to the capitalist asset holding class, you no longer have political power. You're no longer welcome at the table. You don't get to even open your mouth to negotiate. You can cry in your newspapers if you like. But the decision makers are going to be the people who are actually working in the factories. The decisions are going to be made by the people actually working the jobs, by the people actually driving the buses, by the people actually doing the work, by the people who actually live in the communities. Those are the people who are actually going to be making the decisions, right? That some deranged, demented capitalist looking at a spreadsheet at the apex of his castle, getting sucked off by some 12-year-old, right? They're going to have nothing to do with our society any longer. Let Mark Zuckerberg go into his creepy little pedophile cabal underground bunker that he's building in Maui and die there, while the rest of us get on with the building of a real society. And when they cry about it, we will laugh. Why would people work under communism when everything is given to you? This is a classic propaganda line about what communism actually is, and it has absolutely nothing to do with communism, right? That communism literally is the process of empowering the worker. That right now, the way the arrangement actually works, in the society today is that you work for a capitalist owner for a wage. The capitalist owner takes your surplus value, i.e., and keeps it for himself, i.e., you don't actually get paid what you're worth in a capitalist society. There's a tax levied on you by capitalists, and it's called their profits. You just don't consider it a tax for some reason, and you don't get anything for it. That's what's so funny about libertarians, is that you all cry about taxes. Taxes are theft. Taxes are theft. Well, you get something for your taxes, right? Theoretically, even, you get something for your taxes. You pay taxes and you get roads, you get electrical grids, you get infrastructure, theoretically. Not in America, obviously, because the whole thing's a failure. But if you pay taxes, you actually get, you have the expectation of getting something. Whereas when the capitalists levy their tax against you, i.e. their profit margin, you get fuck all, right? And nobody expects you to get anything. You don't even expect to get anything, right? That they can just take your surplus value, tell you to fuck off and die, and that's the arrangement. Well, what communism says is, no, instead of that, the labor that you do, you'll get the full value of your labor. And the capitalist will be told to go fuck off and get a job, right? Like this whole idea that under communism you'll be given stuff for free. It's embarrassing propaganda that misunderstands what communism is about. Because what communism is about is the workers seizing the means of production, working the means of production, and keeping the value of their labor for themselves and deciding what to do with the means of production for themselves. Not some creepy outside force, some pedophile loser, psychopath Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos type, making decisions about what happens in a factory in a state he doesn't even live in. Yeah, just keep those workers working in tornado season. Oh, the factory blew away because it got hit by a tornado. Oh, well, increase production. 20 people died. Who gives a fuck? Right? Or if it was workers, they'd be like, it's a tornado coming. Get out of here. It's going to shut down production. Yeah, so? Like, we, Outlaw Barber, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. Like, the libertarian idea of how to run an economy is essentially celebrating your own enslavement. The capitalist does not provide any service whatsoever. The capitalist withholds services. That's what capitalists actually do. Capitalists withhold services. They don't provide services, they withhold services. And they say to you, if you don't work for me, then you don't get access to the services I actively withhold. Right? That we could actually provide these services cheaper, and you know it's cheaper. It would be immediately cheaper. You know how it would be immediately cheaper? You would get rid of the parasite in the system. And that would be the capitalist, who does nothing, provides no value whatsoever. He doesn't move the items, grow the items, create the items, produce the items, right? He doesn't even decide how items are distributed or where things should go. He literally hires someone to do that for him, right? The idea that capitalists are these great decision makers, embarrassing. They hire people to do that. Like, that's what these organizations like 6th Street and BlackRock are for, right? And of course, what this all does is it creates a bottleneck of creative pursuit. It creates a bottleneck. This idea of bottlenecking is something that should become commonly understood. That all decisions and thoughts and creative ideas and pursuits and what should be done with manufacturing inevitably go through this ridiculous bottleneck, which is stuck, which is filled up by these absolute dullards, these absolute like fail son mediocrity kids who are essentially wealth inheritors, like Elon Musk with his apartheid mines, or Bill Gates, whose mommy got him a job, right? Just these people who are, or Peter Thiel, who wants to live forever and so spends his money trying to in cryogenic pursuits and things. Like, these people are embarrassing. They don't want to solve problems. They're not interested in solving problems. The idea of solving problems actually bores them, right? Oh, the capitalist provides the tools. Who made the tools? Was it the capitalist that made the tools? Who made the tools? Literally, your defense of capitalism is, they're holding a piece of paper and standing in front of them is a man with a gun. That's your entire defense of capitalism. Oh, his dad gave him a piece of paper, which incidentally, his dad literally committed a genocide and destroyed everybody to get that piece of paper written down. bribed a bunch of politicians in order to get that piece of paper. And now there's a group of thugs that beat the shit out of you if you stand up and say, who cares about that piece of paper? Like, and then you turn around and you go, well, you know what we need to do? We need to get rid of the only body that exists to regulate those people and empower the psychopaths because they have all the tools. The great thing about capitalism is that you can always start your own small business. Embarrassing. Just embarrassing, dude. Like this idea that you're going to compete against 6th Street. The idea that you're going to compete. Like just charming. Like charmingly embarrassing. Like a little kid being like, one day I'm gonna go to the moon. Like, okay, son, like whatever you say. Meanwhile, he's got a D in physics. Like, no, you're not. You're not gonna compete. The best possible outcome for you in the system of capital is that you'll make something that's gonna get you bought out. And so you'll end up getting a little bit of cash. But you're never going to become a Jeff Bezos. You're never going to become like an Elon Musk. This temporarily embarrassed billionaire idea is just so fucking ridiculous. Like there's like a 0.000000000000000000001% chance that it'll happen. And you look at a system that says, hey, we could provide shelter, provide food, make sure the air is clean, make sure the water's clean, and make sure you have a government that actually responds to your needs. Or you could have your 0.0000001% chance of being a billionaire and getting to Mars for sure. It's happening for sure. Like, and that's your great thing. So the best thing that you have to offer is this pathetic gamble of a life instead of actually pursuing a system that supports human life in a meaningful way, right? And even if you do become a billionaire, even if you do manage to achieve it, well, you're living in a society that's in total decay because of it. The society is in a perpetual decay because of the system of capital, but you're a billionaire, so who gives a fuck, right? The state took over, and the problem with that, authoritarianism, bedtimes are authoritarian, violence, loss of right, one-party state. Like, again, like no connection whatsoever to the idea that people like Elon Musk own the government. Like that's what's baffling about the libertarian position. Just like there's just no acknowledgement whatsoever that billionaires buy politicians. Right? There's just 0%. It doesn't exist. The government is a monster that lives out in the boonies somewhere. And if we just got rid of the monster, then everything would be utopian and perfect. What are you talking about? What are you fucking talking about, man? Like, it hurts my brain that there are people walking around out there who actually think this way, who are just so disconnected to what is going on in the system around them. That they can see a billionaire, literally a guy who has more money and wealth than ancient pharaohs, see the government and not put 1 + 1 = 2 together. They work together. They're allies. The capitalist works with the democratic structure. The capitalist bribes and owns politicians within the structure of government. That's why it's called a dictatorship of capital. That's why communists refer to it as a dictatorship of capital, because only capitalists can interact with it. like, geez Louise. Why are we talking about JFK in the chat? Why are we doing that? Yeah, the government is totally corrupt because it's a dictatorship of capital, right? But the solution isn't to get rid of government, right? Like, that's just not the solution. It doesn't. It's not going to work. Like, it'll work for the billionaire class. They'll be over the moon about it, right? But if you get rid of the government, right? If you go after government because taxes are theft, well, guess what? Your private taxes are just going to go through the roof. Your wages are going to go down. You're going to lose any benefits you actually have. And the idea that, like, I'll just get a job somewhere else. Like, these people own the market, right? Your myth, the mythology of the free market, the myth that there is such a thing as a free market in the first place is just so cute. It's so cute to believe that the market isn't actually owned by a small group of people. Like literally, Vanguard, BlackRock, 6th Street own up to 80% of the shares on the stock market. That means they own the market. And those three organizations own 20% of each organization, of themselves. So that, of each other, rather. So they have ownership amongst one another. So there's this incestuous internal relationship, and then they own 80% of the shares collectively together. Like, the market is owned. The idea that you're just going to, like, I'll create a new invention and I'll be an entrepreneur. Like, no, you won't. Like, no, you won't. The best thing, the best it'll ever look like is fucking Dragon's Den, which has got to be the most dystopian show. That literally there's just rich, demented rich cocksuckers, like a guy like Kevin O'Leary, who's literally a fraud, sitting there being like, how can I invest my wealth? Convince me, pleb, why I should give you my enormous sum of money. Get fucked. Like, get fucked. Like these people might as well be wearing crowns and shit. Like, it's just, and we're all just like, this is normal. What a normal society we live in. Not a dystopian hellscape at all. Like, watch one episode of Dragon's Den, man. And just, like, all you gotta do is put in your mind an ancient, like an old medieval guy with a horn. And anytime anything happens, and like a knight. And anytime anything happens, the knight does like one of these like kind of moves. And like the guy pulls out the horn, like, Sir Reginald von Trappenstein III. Right? And it's there. It's exactly the same thing. Please, your grace, if it pleases your grace, I have to show you today the great technology and the great technological device of my devising. Something to beguile and amuse you. It is a leash for a dog. That is impossible to cut. Impossible to cut, sir? Impossible to cut. Well, I demand a demonstration of this before I'm to invest 1 farthing. Well, certainly, sir. Well, you will see here my sharpest set of scissors. Your sharpest set of scissors? I demand proof of the sharpest set of scissors. Well, shall you, good sir, use... like, just like I could go on forever with this. Like, it's like it's watching like a medieval proceeding. And that, like, the Shark Tank or the Dragon's Den, these people might as well be lords and ladies. That, like, we're reverting into a monarchical feudalism, and it's so obvious, right? I believe in meritocracy. Literally, the people who are at the top of the meritocracy were born there. Like this embarrassing meritocratal idea, right? So Elon Musk, his father, made billions of dollars in apartheid South Africa. His dad literally owns slave mines, right? You understand? Emerald mines with slaves in them. His dad makes a bunch of money. Elon Musk gets born into that, inherits it. Meritocracy. David Thompson, 10th richest person in the world, richest Canadian. His name is David Thompson. His official title, recognized by the government of Canada, is the 3rd Baron of Fleet. His family emigrated to Canada as barons in order to run a barony. They were literal monarchs who existed in Canada. David Thompson makes his money because he essentially has so much money that he invests in about 5% of everything, right? So he takes his money and spreads it out throughout the entire economy, so that as long as the line goes up, he's making money. He's literally a parasite and was born that way. Like, this idea of a meritocracy, what are you talking about? There's no observable evidence to show you that there is such a thing as a meritocracy. There's absolutely not one scrap of evidence that shows you that there is such a thing as a meritocracy. All there is people who are well positioned in order to take advantage of conditions that exist around them. And so some people are very tall, and so they get to be a basketball player. But if they were born 200 years ago, before basketball was even a thing, they'd just be like, wow, that boy's tall. And that'd be the end of it. That'd be the end of the whole fucking story. Right? There's so many, like, the thing that I hate about these meritocracy heads, the thing that kills me about these meritocracy people and these people who are just standing in front of you being like, it's a meritocracy, for sure it is. Says me who was born at the top of the meritocracy, so I'm the best. Right? The self-congratulatory aspect of it, the self-congratulatory nature is that fundamentally what you're saying is that out of all of the variables that exist in creation, right? So literally every other person who ever existed, every institution that has ever existed, and then also every force of the universe itself, including ideas like gravity, right? All of that compared to me, and the deciding factor of what actually matters is me. It's just the most arrogant, self-righteous, self-congratulatory, deluded, nightmarishly narcissistic worldview a person can have. Out of all of the things that exist in all of the universe and all of the things that could have happened to me when I was randomly generated into the world and the circumstances that persisted around me, the deciding factor is how awesome I am. Yeah, meritocracy, dude. Certainly isn't a self-righteous narcissist patting himself on the back, trying to convince a bunch of gullible people who are worshiping that guy that the way forward is to work hard and be intelligent. It's competency is the number one thing. Competency at what, Jordan? Competency at what? Is it exploiting everybody around you and backstabbing everybody? Is that what it is? Oh, seems like. like literally the guy is like, I'll abandon my entire profession and stab everybody into the back and bail on my whole thing and use them all as tokens in order to make money with the Daily Wire. Competency! Yeah, we need less competent psychopaths running our culture. Thanks. And with that, I'm going to go pee. I drank too much coffee today. Too much coffee today. Oh, and I do want to say, because I just went on like this big rant because of you, bud. Your name is Male Rights USA. I do want you to know that even though that was like a very dramatic kind of rant that I just went on, I actually think you're being very polite and very lovely, asking questions, not insulting anybody, putting your perspective out there without condescending anybody. And so I really value you in the chat. Like, I've really noticed this about people, Trumpers. These Trumper people are like this, right? Which is that I think that you have acknowledged that something has gone wrong. You've acknowledged that something has gone wrong. You're looking out into the world and the society around you, and you're saying, something's gone shifty here. Something's gone shitty. Something's gone a kilter, right? And that already puts you ahead of liberals and conservatives who are pretending like everything's fine, right? It's only been very recently that liberals and conservatives are willing to stand up and say, yeah, what the fuck? Like, obviously. Like, it took, like, literally the housing market going up by a factor of 3 for people to be like, yeah, maybe something's going wrong. And I just find, so you've successfully diagnosed that there's a problem. I just find that the solutions that are coming out of the like pro-Trump or the right-wing crowd are well-meaning but a failure. They're not going to work. For very clear and obvious reasons, they're not going to work. They're going to fail in big and dramatic ways because fundamentally what's being said is the solution is to do the problem more. I can't accept that position. But I do find that the people who are holding on to that position more or less, and it's not completely true, obviously, but there's a good amount of people coming out of the right who I think really are well-meaning people who are trying their best and are trying to find a solution. That they see that there's a problem. Like, you see that there's a problem. That's why you're like, the government is like, look, it's obviously the government. Holy shit. Look at this fucking government. But I think that there's a wider view and a wider perspective that is being purposefully cut out of your view on purpose and intentionally. That huge sections of the society are highly invested in the idea that you continue down this very narrow path and continue believing that the solution is this singular, very tiny road, and don't pay any attention, put the blinders on, right? And if a communist comes into view, just go, communism, 100 billion people, Vavula iPhone, right? And I'm just asking you, and I'm just begging all the right-wingers out there who many of them I think are well-meaning people who are just trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Just go like this. Just that. That's and that's really all it's going to take. That when you look at these shitty, corrupt politicians, see the hand of the capitalist putting the money in their back pocket. That if your solution is to empower someone like Elon Musk, then I don't know how you're missing the money that he's funneling into the back pockets of these guys. I don't know how you're missing how the system of capital is a larger connected system than just the White House. That there's the White House, that there are banks, and these organizations all collude and work together against the interests of the working class. That the billionaire class, the asset holding class, I think the cleanest way that I can say it is that the distinction that exists in the society, the distinction that exists in the society isn't between what you think of as the ruling class, which is the elected parliamentarians, right? The Congress and the Senate and all of this. That the true distinction and the true distinction of power is between those who have assets and those who do not. Those who do not have assets and those who do have assets. That there is an asset holding class. And I'm not talking about like your dad who has a shitty house. I'm talking about people who own billions of dollars of farmland, who own billions of dollars of assets, hard assets, who own rivers, who own lakes, who own forests. And they withhold those assets and withhold access to those assets and say to the people who do not have assets, who have nothing to their name but their labor power, they say to those people, sell yourself to me and you get to eat. And those people, the asset holding class, own the politicians, they own the banks, they own the churches, they own all of the institutions so that when you walk into any of these places to try to find any relief from a society that has actively betrayed you, you'll come face to face with someone who works for them. That's the structure of your society. That's the way it actually works. And if you fall for this trap, if you fall for this idea that says all of your problems are because of the Democrats, all of your problems are because of the Republicans, then you've purposefully narrowed your perspective so that you're easy to manipulate. And the ownership class will use you as a cudgel against other members of the working class in order to ensure that you never get assets and they keep all their assets. That's what's actually happening. Cap rent, scalp landlords. I mean, I'm more or less of the opinion that like rent is a tax, right? That's what it is. It's a tax. You pay a tax to a lord. It's a landlord. And we call it rent. It's a tax. Like, it's a very obvious, clear tax. Right? And the landlord class makes the number higher. And why do they make it higher? Because they thought of a higher number. I said I had to pee a little moment ago. I still do. To the bathroom. What should we do? Here, I'm going to go use the washroom, and then I'll come back and I'll answer that question. And guess what? You're not going to like it. Too much coffee. Too much coffee. Too much coffee for John. Too much coffee. Too much coffee. Too much coffee for John. What should we do? What should we do? What should we do? What can be done? First of all, Lenin wrote a book called What Should Be Done that people should read. It really does just boil down to this, okay? You have to acknowledge, first and foremost, this is the primary acknowledgement. If you don't acknowledge this, then there's no point moving forward. That the systems of electoral politics that exist in Western capitalist countries, especially Canada and the United States, but the European nations aren't exactly free from this, were erected by monarchs and landholders in order to maintain the monarchies and the land holdings. They were not created for us to interact with a democratic system and have that system respond to our needs. The system does not respond to our needs. It's designed to not respond to our needs. It's not going to respond to your needs if there's a liberal or a conservative or an NDPer or a Green Party or a Democrat or a Republican. it's not going to respond because it's not designed to respond. That the only time, literally, the only time these quote-unquote democratic systems and structures have ever responded to the people is when thousands and thousands and thousands of people were outside the halls of power. That's the only time anything has ever been done. The New Deal did not come into place because Roosevelt was a good man. He didn't pass New Deal legislation because he looked out into his culture and said, there are things that we could do to improve the lot of the working man. He did them because when he looked outside the windows of the White House, he saw thousands of trade unionists, socialists, and communists holding signs calling for a revolution in the wake of a literal communist revolution that had happened in Soviet Russia, or Tsarist Russia, becoming Soviet Russia. The threat of overthrow, the threat of the people walking into the halls of power and pushing the powerful out and redrawing the Constitution and saying these capitalists own nothing, the workers now own the means of production, is the only thing that the capitalist class has ever and will ever respond to. You can put whoever you want into any position, anywhere, into any electoral position. You can vote Republican, Democrat, whoever you want. But until you have thousands and thousands of people outside of the halls of power with clear stated demands of what they expect to see done, nothing will ever happen, nor has it ever happened. And what we are learning in the modern era is that if you stand up and demand concessions from the capitalists, they will eventually regress those concessions. And so the only demand that we should be making, and the only thing that we should be focusing on, is organizing ourselves to surround the halls of power to remove the means of production from the capitalist class permanently. And we should expect nothing less. The only way that's going to happen is if you knock on your neighbor's doors and talk to them about it. That you talk to the people around you. That you create a group in your neighborhood that is organized explicitly along these lines. It is literally the only way it will actually happen. And let me be really clear about something while I'm talking this way. I do not believe that there will ever be a communist revolution that will sweep through America and take over and everyone will be happy about it. If communists stormed the White House today and tried to take it, it would destroy the country. Because the country is going to be destroyed. The American empire is falling. It is in a collapse. It will not recover. It is going to experience a period of isolationism while the entire rest of the world isolates it. And it's simply not going to be able to pay its bills. And when it turns to the very people it empowered in order to ask them to pay the bills, the billionaire class will say no. They will instead fund a series of independence movements, and the empire will fall apart. This is the most common thing that will happen. When empires fall, that is how they fall. There has been no empire in the history of mankind that falls and all of its territories remain unified and intact. When the American empire falls, it is highly likely that there will be internal conflict. Like, the idea that a country the size of America is going to stay together as an empire is ludicrous. As this begins to fall, sections of it will become neo-fascist. Florida is already fascist. It will continue to be that way. It will become more and more fascist, and when the waters come up and wipe most of it away, it will be to our benefit. There are places, Seattle, Washington, for example, that have a real opportunity to swing to the left. There are places that have the opportunity to foment a communist revolution in a serious way. As the power of the federal state begins to recede and break apart, and as independence movements begin to take hold, my money's on Texas. Elon Musk lives there. Joe Rogan lives there, right? Won't it be wild to listen to Joe Rogan talking about how great it is that Texas is seceding, right? Wouldn't that be wild and likely? So the goal moving forward for anyone who is serious and concerned about what is to be done, well, the goal is to talk to your neighbors, to build mutual aid organizations, to build organizations that are explicitly and purposefully outside of the system of electoral politics with no initiative or goal whatsoever to merge itself with the system of electoral politics, because that is a dead end. The Democratic Party is a graveyard for leftists. It's designed that way, and it's done on purpose. The superdelegate system means that you will never see even a socialist, even a democratic socialist. You will never see one lead that party on purpose, by design. The Republicans, that's a dead end for other reasons. This whole project begins to break apart, and all you will be left with, the only people you will be able to turn to, will be the people who live in your building, will be the people who live in your street, will be the people who live in your neighborhood. So talk to those people. Get to know them. Because eventually it will become extremely obvious that you have been abandoned. It's already true, but soon it will be obvious. So get to know your neighbors, build alliances now, and if you're lucky, you might actually live in a neighborhood or a country or a state, well, a country. Some of these places are larger than European countries. That's France. France, Missouri, Kansas. Like, any one of these is as large as any European state, as any European nation. So these become independent nations and independent states, and if you're lucky, you'll be living in one that swings to the left and not the right. And many of them will. Like the Deep South, the South will rise again, and it'll bring all of its old ideas with it. So you've got to do the thing that internet denizens such as ourselves are terrified to do. You've got to knock on someone's door and introduce yourself and say, "Hi, my name's Jonathan," or whatever your name is. I live just down the hallway, uh, 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 and I'd like to know your name. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about what's going on in the building and what's going on around you. It doesn't get scarier for us. And that is what is to be done. And hopefully, from the ashes will rise a series of communist organizations that will be able to actually unify themselves and be able to actually build something meaningful. I'm not 100% hopeful on those lines for lots of different reasons. CPUSA condemns Hamas, praises Zionist communists, aligns with settlers. Prospects for peace, mutual security, and justice for Palestinians seem bleak after the gruesome massacre of almost 1,200 Israelis and foreign workers on October 7th, the start of history, by Hamas, the taking of hostages. Like, we've got communists who are on the side of the Zionists. So, I'll say it over and over and over again. We deserve these coming collapses. We've worked very, very hard and very diligently and very studiously to ensure that they will be as dramatic and as devastating to us as possible. We've done absolutely nothing to brace for them. We've done absolutely nothing to prepare for them. When we walk face first into the thresher, the capitalist class will escape to their underground bunkers, will escape to their mountaintop palaces, will escape to their islands, and let us die. That's their goal. It's very obvious. Midnight Rose, good to see you. Yeah, Midnight Rose talking about what's going on in Argentina. Yeah, like, I love it. I love that, like, straight up, the libertarians finally get a guy in a position of power, right? And he's basically a Nazi. Like, he's one step down. He's not yet rounding people up. But, like, he's got all the signs. He's certainly a fascist. Like, and it's, like, pretty inarguable. And and I just love it that, like, in 5 years' time, right? In 5 years' time, Argentina is going to be a shithole because it's being designed that way, right? 3 or 4 people will make a lot of money, but everybody else will suffer for it significantly. Like, it's going to be dramatic. It'll be precipitous. The line will go down dramatically. Socialist Venezuela, doing great. Like, struggling, for obvious reasons, right? They've got a boot on their neck. But, like, the people are unified. The culture and the society is doing everything it can for itself, right? Poverty rates are going down. Literacy rates are going up. Homelessness is going down. They're literally in conversations with their neighbors about unification, right? That's what this is. Like, but Vuvula iPhone. That's the real thing. That's the real problem. Like what we are seeing, and one thing that I think I hope people start to key into in a big and serious way, is that this modern era has been colored by different attempts and different approaches to rebrand fascism. Some more successful than others, right? That neoliberalism was a rebranding of fascism that adopted all of the economic policies of fascism while attempting to merge with concepts of inclusivity and diversity. These concepts they don't work. They're incompatible with one another. because fascist economics is inherently authoritarian. I shouldn't use the word authoritarian. I should never use the word authoritarian. It doesn't mean anything. They're inherently exclusionary. They're inherently designed to empower a small group of owners and exclude everybody else. And so the concession seems to be, or the base conclusion of neoliberalism seems to be more female genociders. That seems to be the end point of neoliberalism. That as long as the person who's pressing the button is a woman, then everything's great. As long as the people who are rounding up the minorities, as long as the people who are operating the gas chambers are themselves minorities, then everything's fine. That's essentially the neoliberal concession. Economically, basically fascism in every way. Libertarianism, on the other hand, is a rebranding of fascism that is basically just fascism. That it basically takes a look at diversity issues, calls them woke, and then says we don't need to pay any attention to those. And for the actual Nazis in their ranks, they just turn a blind eye. That's basically what happens. That not every libertarian, not every fascist is a Nazi, but every Nazi is a fascist, and the fascists will turn a blind eye to the Nazis because they feel that they're useful, or they're exerting their free speech or their freedom of expression. ANCAP seems to be another one. Right? So there's multiple different rebrandings of fascism that have come into the society, but they're fascism. Right? That there's a lot of debate about what fascism is or is not, but I really do think that Mussolini nailed it. Mussolini said that fascism is better called corporatism because it's the merger of business and state. So anytime Justin Trudeau stands up and starts to talk about public-private partnerships, anytime there's a collapse of a system and then the people bail out the private sector and abandon the workers, looks pretty fascist to me. Looks pretty fascist to me. Eric writes, John, do you know if Marx wrote anything about how inflation works? If he did, I don't know it. I think that Marx was more interested in the labor theory of value and how it integrated with assets. I think that he was less concerned about currencies. That the worship of money is actually like a relatively new well, I shouldn't say relatively new phenomenon. Like, that's not true. Literally, you've got biblical passages being like, man can only serve God or money, right? But what we're looking at, and it's something I talk about a lot, and it's something I really, really believe in, is like, we're looking at a religious orthodoxy now. Like, the capitalists, and I really believe that because I'm seeing more and more, like, here's this video, which I've been sort of thinking, am I going to go through it? I don't think I am going to go through it with you guys. But, like, the people who are on this capitalist side are incoherent religious acolytes. Very, very obviously. That the people on the communist side are studying a science. That they are looking at reality and they are using evidence in order to make decisions, in order to make observations about what's going on and make predictions about what's going on. These people are following a religious orthodoxy. And it's getting extremely, extremely obvious that that's the case. I've talked a lot about what that religious orthodoxy is on this channel. The worship of money, the worship of the self or the individual, and the worship of chaos. Or the free market, if you prefer. And this religious orthodoxy can basically be summed up in a single 3-word statement: more money, good. That it makes total sense in the capitalist ethos to exchange clean water, clean air, workable land, edible food, safe communities, healthcare systems, it makes perfect sense to exchange all of that for numbers on a screen that we invented in the first place. That's the capitalist ethos in a nutshell. It is a religious orthodoxy that worships money as a god, that says of the people who have the most money that they are to be respected simply because they have it, with no investigation in how they actually got it. And that fundamentally anything that occurs from the system of money generation and the people who have it, no matter what they do, is an inherent good and a benefit to the society. It's a religious orthodoxy that is completely detached from even the most basic observation of what's going on in the society. Good to see you, Blood. What do you mean with fascists? I thought it was from the fascism party that Mussolini founded, strictly Italian. Right, but fascism then has spread. Like, you're correct. Mussolini founded the Fascili party that became known as fascism, right? And that extended into Hitler's Germany, and that extended into other people. And it's an orthodoxy, and it's an idea in and of itself. And I think the cleanest way to articulate it, and there's been lots of books written about it, and you can read about like the culture of fascism and what all this kind of stuff does, but economically speaking, from the structure of it, it is when the business class and the ruling class or the political apparatus merge. That's fascism. So when the church and state merge, everybody understands that that's a theocracy, right? And no debate, right? If there's a church institution and it's in control of the state, that's a theocracy. Well, if it's a business institution, right, and it's merged with the state, that's fascism. Very cleanly. And the only reason there is debate about it is because one of the strategies of the death cult is to obfuscate, is to create complexity where there is none. That most of the time things are actually quite simple. It might take a minute to go through them, but they are actually quite simple. But the death cult understands that because there's so much information in the world, that they can simply obfuscate and create more information in order to make it more difficult for people to make sense of what's going on. You can see people like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a master of this. Jordan Peterson takes extremely simple, plain to understand concepts and obfuscates them and makes them complex on purpose by being obtuse on purpose. When he went on Joe Rogan's podcast, that's precisely what he was doing. It was just so clumsily done and so obvious and stupid that that anyone could see through it almost immediately, as long as you don't suck Jordan Peterson's cock or a climate change denier, right? If you're actually a person who's reasonable and understands what's going on in the world, you saw pretty plainly that what Peterson was doing was being intentionally obtuse and making a simple concept complex on purpose, so to obfuscate what was going on, to prevent movement on it and solutions, which is the goal for a fraud like Peterson. So intentional obfuscation. And it's often used, like, that's really what is being what happens when people say, oh, you just call everything that you don't like Nazism. It's a way to obfuscate what is plain and obvious, right? Such as in the situation with Israel, right? Such as in the situation with Israel. Like, it is extremely plain, very obvious to see to anyone with even a remote brain in their head that Zionism is Nazism. That it is a form of Nazism. It is a supremacist, religious orthodoxy that says we are the special people and you are to be purged and cleansed. And if you fight back against us, that is the only justification that we need in order to justify our ethnic cleansing of you. When Joe Biden stands up and says, I am a Zionist, he is saying to your face, I am a Nazi. That as soon as you understand that Zionism is Nazism, it's extremely plain what's going on. But the power structure does not want you to make this very obvious connection. That Zionism is Nazism. And so they have to obfuscate. They have to pump the airways. They have to do everything they can to keep away from your reasoning capacity and to make you skeptical of that which you obviously know to be the truth. Anyone with even the smallest brain in their head can put together that what is going on in Israel is being done by Nazis, Zionists, and that Zionism is Nazism. And the more I learn about these Zionists, the more concrete that becomes. All you have to do is listen to them talk. Just listen to them talk. And if you think anything other than, yeah, these guys are fucking Nazis, then you might just be a fucking Nazi. If you are interested, this is from Outlaw Barber, if you are interested in Zionism, you should read The Secrets of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. There are free audio versions on YouTube. The central banking systems, I remember when I was like 20, I learned all about the central banking systems and the way that they worked. And when I was 20, it had this like effect of being like, whoa. But now I'm like older and I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly, yeah. like it's such a non-burger for me anymore. Like it's like, of course they did. Like of course the owners of the society created a system of money manipulation. Like what's so fascinating about how money works? I was thinking about this today. Is that money creates invisible chains. That chattel slavery and the system of chattel slavery requires direct enslavement. They require literal chains, right? Sorry, I just saw that we have a guy named Vosh Lover. Source required, bud. I'll take a source on that, Vosh. Just embarrassing. The Q, they're like, what? You're a denier. Everybody knows. Yep, source required, bud. I'll look at any source you like. I think we've already gone through this, though, and I think you've already discredited yourself as a thinker, but it's okay. Money creates invisible chains. That you are chained to an institution through debt or through the need to pay rent, right? Through the need to pay your taxes, right? Rent being a tax. And if you don't, then you starve. And so money creates invisible chains. And it's important for the ownership class to ensure that those who are chained don't even notice the chain. Or if they do notice the chain, that they either become resigned to the chain, or they come, in the best case scenario, to love the chain. That's the goal of the capitalist class. To ensure that it takes you as long as possible to realize that there is even a chain there in the first place. that if you do notice the chain, you'll say something like, oh, that's just human nature. That's just natural to have a chain to an institution through a currency. Normal. Just a natural thing. If you break free of that, you'll go, oh, well, we're all doing it. What can be done? Or maybe you go, the chain is the greatest thing we've ever invented. It's great that everybody is chained to this institution. And if you take even a smaller step backwards, just the smallest little bit step backwards, you really put together that there's a term for what this is. And the term is wage slavery. That you are living as a wage slave. If you don't get your wage, you don't get to eat. The chattel slavers of the South on the lead up to the Civil War actually argued that chattel slavery was a more moral system than wage slavery, this current system, which the Lincoln Republicans openly called a system of wage slavery. Lincoln ran on the abolition of wage slavery. You can listen to his speeches where he talks about the abolition of wage slavery. This system that we are currently under. And the Confederates made the argument that chattel slavery is a more moral system of slavery because when there is no work to be done, chattel slavers still have to take care of their slaves because their slave is a piece of property. And they can't just throw their slave out. They can't just lay their slave off and make their slaves scrabble around to try to find other wages and other sources of income like a wage slaver can. There's an expectation and a legal requirement in chattel slavery to continue feeding your slave and housing your slave and caring for your slave, even if there is nothing for that slave to do. And the chattel slavers made the argument that this made chattel slavery a more superior and more moral system of slavery than wage slavery. Vosh Lover loves the chain. Just loves the chain. In spite of all of the evidence. This Vosh Lover guy has to be a troll. Yeah. In spite of all of the evidence, right? Like, every so often it's nice to have a religious acolyte in the chat to really show people how demented these people are, right? Like, it's the demented nature. It's just the rabid dedication to the chain, right? They're literally chained to a system of wage enslavement, talking about how great it is that they have a chain tied to their very life, to their food supply that goes between them and the investor class. And they're happy about it. It's like it's like a mental illness. Right? But, like, it's actually kind of insulting to people who have mental illnesses, so sorry if you took it that way. But it is a religious ideology. It's a religious worldview. It has nothing to do with anything that's real. It's just a religious perspective that worships money, worships those who hold money, and worships anything that they do, no matter how stupid it is. Like, you take a look at someone like Elon Musk. This guy's a complete and total fraud. Like, a total fraud. everything he has either done, everything he has done has either been completely fraudulent, it has been a total failure, or is a front for something far more sinister and dangerous. Like, that's what SpaceX is. Like, SpaceX is not, let's get to Mars. We're gonna get to Mars, everybody. It's gonna happen. We're gonna get to Mars. SpaceX is about the militarization of space. It's a front for the military-industrial complex. So that instead of looking at the United States military as it attempts to militarize space and going, whoa, the United States military is attempting to militarize space, we all go, Elon Musk is doing space stuff, and he's a space genius, and he's definitely not doing it on behalf of the United States empire. Certainly not a front. Like, yeah, Outlaw Barber. I was called anti-Semitic on Twitter because I mentioned the Islamic banking system doesn't do interest loans for business or home loans. Elon Musk is funny Twitter man, and that's all he ever wants you to think he is. Like, what I love about the whole Twitter thing with Elon Musk is, like, big super genius guy, but he, like, literally is spending all his time on Twitter. Like, big super genius guy. He must be so super busy. Right? Like, it's almost as though the job that he does is not actually that important. SpaceX, more like space certain pagan symbol. I don't get it, but I agree. I don't actually know what pagan system you're talking about. Or pagan symbol. I got nothing against the pagans. The pagans are all right. They're doing okay. Yeah. This is called usury. Real Christianity and Judaism also believed in this as well. Yeah. So I've got a couple of Caitlin Johnstone articles that I've been wanting to read. Going mask off about the two-state solution lie. Right? The more we learn about these guys, the deeper it goes. Oh, thanks, XD. I understand now. There's been a surprising number of recent Israeli government admissions that are not only is a two-state solution not on the table, but it never was. Benjamin Netanyahu boasted at a recent press conference in Tel Aviv that he spent decades thwarting the formation of a Palestinian state, and that he is proud of doing so. Netanyahu's senior advisor, Mark Regev, told Piers Morgan that true Palestinian state with its own military and true sovereignty was never an option for Israel, calling it common sense that Palestinians should at best have less than a state. Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hatveli, told Sky News last week that there was absolutely no possibility of a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Like, this is what I'm talking about, guys. Like, anytime anybody comes in here, like this embarrassing Voshlever guy, being like, communism killed millions of people, source required. Right? Source required. And you know what source I accept? You know what a good source is? The people doing the killing. Because when leaders of countries kill people, they do so openly. They're not very clandestine about it. Especially if it's about killing millions of people. Right? So when losers come in here and talk about the Holodomor or mouse famines or any of this kind of stuff, right? Source required. Yeah, I'll take the speech that Mao gave. I'll take the speech that Stalin gave. Heck, I'll take a speech given by the Ukrainian governor. I'll take a speech given by the governor of the province under Mao. Like, people don't experience genocides quietly, and genocides are not done quietly. And so when these losers come in here and start talking about communism killed a million, source required. Because when it comes to the Israeli genocide, we literally have confessions. When it came to Hitler's genocide, we have open confessions. When it comes to the genocide of the First Nations people, the enslavement of the black population, the residential school system here in Canada. It was all done very openly. There were votes in Parliament and Congress and Senate and the presidency. People voted on it. They made speeches. They talked about it. And yet somehow, when it comes to all of these supposed communist atrocities, they're all done super quietly. Yeah, so nobody even talks about it. There's not even a lower bureaucrat in working for the Soviets. Not even some provincial lord. Not even a passive observer while it's happening. Not a Soviet watcher or a China watcher actually comments on it when the event occurs. It's always like 20 or 30 years later suddenly it pops up. It's almost like it's total fucking bullshit. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for the Israeli government to keep up the generations-long lie that it had always supported a two-state solution, but the Palestinians had kept rejecting it, and claimed that only now, after October 7th, has such a deal become impossible. But at this point in time, Netanyahu is so politically desperate, and being oppositional to Palestinian rights is so politically popular in Israel, that these goons can't resist telling the truth about themselves. And it's important to remember that people like Bill Maher have spread that lie around, right? Bill Maher spread the lie around that it's the Palestinians that are holding up the two-state solution. So it's important that we pierce that veil with evidence. And confessions from the leadership of Israel seems like the best evidence that exists. It's actually pretty simple, like most things. Once Israel ruled out a two-state solution on the justification that doing so could allow Palestine to become a military threat, and ruled out a true one-state solution on the justification that giving equal rights to everyone would end Israel's existence as a Jewish ethno-state, the only options left on the table were genocide and ethnic cleansing. The entire position of the pro-Israel side of the Gaza debate is hinged on the premise that there is no limit on the number of innocents you can morally kill when pursuing a military objective. From their point of view, not only is it perfectly acceptable that 10,000 children have been killed by Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza, it would be perfectly acceptable if it was 100,000 or 1,000,000. As far as the Israel supporters' moral framework is concerned, Hamas could have killed 1/10 the number of Israelis it killed on October 7th, and Israel can kill 10 times the number of children it has killed, and Israel's actions in Gaza would still be justified. For normal, psychologically healthy people, this position looks deranged. Of course, there's a limit on the number of innocent people it's acceptable to kill while pursuing military objectives, especially objectives that could be resolved non-militarily. The only exceptions would be situations in which there's no option besides either defeating your enemy by any means necessary or facing your own annihilation. Since there is no rational argument that Hamas poses an existential threat to the state of Israel, and since there were options for responding to October 7th without dropping a single bomb, there is no argument to be made that it is acceptable to kill these innocent human beings while pursuing the completely unattainable goal of wiping out armed resistance to Israel militarily. Peace could be obtained by negotiating with the Palestinian resistance and achieving a deal that works for everyone. The uneasy, abusive status quo of October 6th could also be returned to by simply addressing the massive, spectacular failures of Israel's military and intelligence services, which let October 7th happen in the first place. When you weigh these two options against the option of killing 1,000 children a week in a military offensive in Gaza, both of them are self-evidently superior in the eyes of any normal, healthy person. A peaceful resolution isn't impossible. It just isn't desired. It isn't desired because Israel has long sought to further expel Palestinians from their land, and the war on Hamas provides cover for that goal. The claim that Israel has no other choice but to snuff out tens of thousands of lives in the name of fighting Hamas is patently false. It doesn't need to, it just wants to. Ultimately, their argument is, we need to kill all those people because we really, really want to, which is not a valid defense. After all the lies and atrocities we've seen over the last 2.5 months, everyone should be reflexively disbelieving any claims by the Israeli government and begging the forgiveness of Palestinians for not believing everything they've been claiming for generations. Newsweek has published an opinion piece by a former IDF soldier titled, "Calling for a ceasefire is an anti-Semitic demand that Jews endorse our own genocide." That's right. Now calling for a ceasefire is anti-Semitic. Ceasefires are anti-Semitism. Pro-Palestine chants are genocide. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. As election season heats up, Americans should not allow Biden supporters to draw a distinction between his domestic policy and his horrifying foreign policy. Dead kids are dead kids. They're just as dead regardless of where on earth they live, and their lives matter just as much. Saying a politician is relatively good on domestic policy but bad on foreign policy is like a woman saying her boyfriend cooks and cleans and treats her nice, and his only negative is that he also happens to murder a lot of sex workers. You don't get to compartmentalize horrific acts of mass murder away from the sum total of the picture. Biden's genocide in Gaza and nuclear brinksmanship with Russia are not separate or distinct from the rest of his presidency in comparison to Trump. You'd only believe it's legitimate to compartmentalize domestic policy from foreign policy when discussing how good or bad a U.S. president is if you believed American lives mattered more than non-American lives. That is not a morally defensible position to hold and should be forcefully rejected. Come to Israel. It's the only place Jews can be safe. Okay, I'm here. Hey, who are those guys shooting at us? Oh, they say we're oppressing them. They'll kill us sometimes, but don't worry, the IDF is here to protect us. Oh, what the hell, now the IDF are shooting at us. Oh yeah, they kill us sometimes too. Come join the IDF, where the gals are pretty and the fire is friendly. We have a fellow on Twitch. I don't know if you're still here, my man, because you said this really early on. ASDFGHJ872. You just went like blah, right? Are you a utilitarian? I don't define myself as a utilitarian, but like you should definitely think about what is practical, right? That practical considerations matter. Like, not every decision needs to be made from a practical position. I don't think you can be a successful artist if you think strictly on a practical level, right? That it's at some point there is like an inherent non-rationality. I don't mean irrationality. I mean non-rationality to pursuing arts and to pursuing the humanities and to existing in an existential state to be able to pull what you need to pull to create anything. And like the concept of art itself, the concept of creating art is there's an ephemeral non-utilitarian aspect to it. I think that you can attempt to discuss the utilitarian nature of art and that plays to an extent, but I think it's much more ephemeral. So I think it's interesting and useful to consider the utilitarian and practical nature of all positions. But sometimes it really just does come down to like fuck around and find out. Or like rage matters, right? Human emotion matters. Like these aren't things that you get to just put aside and pretend like they don't play, right? Like this little chart I have right here is all about human emotion. And if you just ignore human emotion and try to do a cold calculation, you're going to find that's going to blow up on you. That's what you're going to find. So I think it's useful to lay out the practical argument, because that can be persuasive for sure, but I don't think it's the most persuasive position. I think that people often don't make their assessments based on what is most practical or most useful and from a utilitarian perspective. And so and I don't think you should expect people do. Right? I think that oftentimes, anytime I talk to somebody who considers themselves a utilitarian, they get frustrated or upset or are amused or bemused that people aren't utilitarians. And it's not the most common position. Humans are very, very emotionally driven. And oftentimes post-rationalize. I would actually argue that most of what we're doing is post-rationalization. Right? And that most of the time people are just going around operating from their gut, right? And just following their instincts. And then if it works out, then I'm a super genius and I ascended the meritocracy through the force of my own brilliance. And if it doesn't work out, then just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and try again. There's lots of opportunity out there. Go out there and do that. And both of those are post-rationalizations, right? And I also do find the utilitarian mindset to oftentimes be somewhat limited, because it pretends as though we are the thing that matters most, and it pretends as though we can decipher everything, and that there aren't articles of faith in the conversation, and that we aren't moving forward with hope or any kind of emotional sort of position. So anyway, that's sort of a long-winded answer. Like, one of the most interesting things I learned when I was in school was Aristotle Aristotle studied ancient Greek theater, right? That by the time Aristotle showed up, they weren't doing theater anymore. That theater was ancient by the time he was showing up. So he had all these plays, and he was looking at the ancient, what are they called? Amphitheaters, right? They had built stone slabs into the sides of hills, and there was a stone stage where they did the performance. And he had the plays in hand. And he spoke about and talked about why the hell did anybody do this? What was the point of any of that? Why would any group of people, especially a group of people who are primarily fishermen, surviving by working the land, why would any of them find any value whatsoever in partitioning off a group of their people who, instead of actually producing food or anything survival based, put on a little performance, put on a little play? And I shouldn't say little. Some of these performances included 500 people. Like the ancient Greek choruses were oftentimes as high as 500 people. That's one of the things that I just don't think really gets captured whenever we talk about ancient Greek theater. That when you see remounts of ancient Greek plays, the chorus is like 3 people. No. That you're sitting in the audience, you're looking over 500 people, and then standing on the stage in the background is one person. and then that one person talks, and then simultaneously 500 other people talk. The closest I think I've ever seen to something that matches it was during the Occupy Wall Street movement, where they did the human microphone is what they called it, where anybody could stand up and they would say a sentence and then the entire crowd would repeat the sentence. It was very, very impressive. It was very, very cool. It was very, very, there was something very authentic and inspiring about it. That a mass of people speaking as one. It's very powerful thing to see. And so Aristotle struggled with this. Why the hell did anybody do this? What was the goal? What was the purpose? And the solution that he came up with, which I think is correct, is that a populace goes through collective trauma, especially if you're living in a survival-based situation. You're a group of fishermen. The ocean is not a kind place. It's highly likely that everyone living in these towns and everyone living in these communities knew people who died because nature claimed them. Just they were on a boat and a storm came in and that was the end of them. Represented by gods like Poseidon and Zeus. And so Aristotle said the people would come together and they would have a collective catharsis. They would have a collective grieving where they would think upon those that they had lost, watching these plays that are primarily about the fragility of humanity, the mercy by which we are beset by the gods and beseeching the gods for mercy. That we exist exclusively at the whims of fate, and that we hope that there is a purpose or a reason behind any of this absurd suffering and ridiculousness that we experience together. And it was through this process of collective catharsis that the community could move on and heal and find a way to cope and deal with the collective traumas that they were experiencing year over year. Is that utilitarian? Is that a thing that they did rationally? Did they sit down and say, well, everyone's quite sad, and so we have to do something and that will create, or was it just something that they pursued emotionally and it just built up over time? And they just came to realize that this was good and that this was important, that this was something that they wanted to do and that they were going to do. And there are similar things in alternative cultures. The Japanese have a cultural tradition where a single Japanese family was the acting family. That unlike the way we think about acting now, where it's all very free market, anybody can go to Hollywood and be an actor, in Japan there was a single family. You could be adopted into it, but it was more common to be married into it. And they would put on every year the same play. And the structure of the play was about going through the stages of growth and the stages of life, following a philosophy they called the way of the flower. And that the way of the flower was was an acknowledgement of the four broad stages of human life. The initial growth, the period of flowering, the standing strong, the withering, and the dying. And that they said that every single stage is beautiful. It should be honored. And so they built a play, one play, that tried to capture that. And the Japanese people would go watch this play every year. And as they grew older, so too did the actors. And new actors would come along because there would be children to old men. And the end of the play has an old man in a samurai suit on the top of a cliff, holding a sword up to creation with lightning flashing, standing with pride for a life well lived. And that you, as the audience member, would have seen that man grow old year over year. That if you were 20 and he was 40, by the time you became 40, he would be 60. And everybody knew that when you saw that man get into that suit, that was the last time you were going to see that man. And that his children were in the position that you began in. And that their children were in the position that that man used to be in. And so as you grew up and every year, year over year, seeing this play, you would see the wheel of time. You would watch the people grow old and die as the young were born. You would watch it in front of your eyes year over year, and you would be part of it. And it would reflect your own experience as you discussed what it was to be alive. Is that utilitarian? Did someone sit down and think to themselves, this will be a useful thing for the society and this will build national pride? Or was it something that they just felt that should be done? We have a fellow in the chat here, Jacob. Jacob 1. Wow. The first of all Jacobs. I'm a cop demo. I'm not sure I know what that is. Can you write out the whole thing, Jacob, so that I'm 100% what it is you're talking about? But I like communism if it worked. I think socialism would be good if it had more than one party, but the parties would be like different views of it, like a Trotsky party, a Maoist party, a Marxist-Leninist party. So Jacob, communism does work. It's worked literally every time it's been tried. It's been very successful. I think for you, because you seem immediately, I get the sense that you are just a nice, well-meaning fellow. That you're not coming in making these statements with this kind of haughty, haha, I'll show the communist. And so I think for you, it's as simple as seek out Michael Parenti. Seek out Michael Parenti. Michael Parenti Yellow Lecture. This one's the most iconic lecture that I think he gave. Is this the whole lecture? I thought that this lecture was much longer. Yeah. Michael Parenti's Yellow Lecture. What's called Michael Parenti's Yellow Lecture. And you should watch the full lecture, of course. They're going to
Professor Terence Tao is the equivalent of a rock star in mathematics.
Check out an ad. Good for you.
Regarded.
Michael Parenti, and you can see why it's called the Yellow Lecture, right? Let's find a really nice. Come on, give me a not goofy picture of Michael Parenti. In any case, Kevin, good to see you. Oh, embarrassing, Voshlover. Communism failed in Venezuela. Just an embarrassing thing to say. The United States sanctions that were put on Venezuela are some of the most crippling sanctions that have ever been passed. The idea that it's communism that's failing Venezuela is a total joke. That it's United States imperialism that put its boot on the back of Venezuela. Literally, we have the United Nations Human Rights Commission saying so. I literally read their paper on my channel. You can go to my channel and type in the word Venezuela. You can find me reading it. The idea that it's communism that failed Venezuela is a joke. That it's communism that's keeping Venezuela from falling to United States imperialism. That the United States is attempting to coup Venezuela. It's attempting to impoverish Venezuela. It's attempting to plunge Venezuela into poverty again. It's attempting to turn it into a colony again. And it's the power and the strength of communism and the people, the Chavistas, who have kept the United States from overthrowing it and have actually strengthened it. Communism caused Venezuelan hyperinflation. Another joke, like a total joke, that literally the CIA will just dump dollars into the Venezuelan economy. Like, it's pretty clear, bud, that you don't actually know anything about what you're talking about. Like, that's pretty obvious. That Venezuela stands strong in Latin America. So strong, in fact, that they're able to negotiate with a neighbor about annexation. Right? So strong that Venezuela has actually begun negotiations to see if Guyana wants to become part of Venezuela. So this idea that communism failed Venezuela, what are you talking about? Poverty rates declined. Healthcare rates improved dramatically. Literacy rates improved. The only people who have lost in Venezuela across the board are the capitalists. Juan Guaido and that lot. And it's not to say that there haven't been hardship, because that's war. And if communism fails on its own merits, then why does the United States keep spending so much money to blow it up? Why do they keep sending stormtroopers in to coup governments? Like, Hugo Chavez was literally kidnapped by the CIA at one point. Like, what are you talking about? Good to see you, Kevin. Jacob writes, there's so much accusations of every socialist experience like China, Cuba, North Korea that it's hard that it is hard to think, I assume, there isn't people who died during it. I remember in school talking about Stalin. I mean, like if a single person dies of a heart attack in the communist regime, the capitalists will say that that's the fault of communism. Like, literally. The Black Book of Communism literally includes people who died of natural causes. Straight up, like, an old man goes, and goes, that's the fault of communism. Communism doesn't work, you guys. People died. So many people died under millions of people. Millions of people died in the Soviet Union while Stalin was the... Yeah. That's the human condition. That's what we do. It's one of the only things that unify us as a people. That at some point, each and every one of us is going to go, and that's it. Like, But then to write those names down in a book and say it's the fault of communism and call it the Black Book of Communism and also include the Nazis in there, it's a joke. Like, of course there were people who died. There were wars. Like people died during the Civil War too. Should it not have happened? Should we have not abolished chattel slavery in the South? Right? Like the whole argument. It's like, yes, of course people died. They were fighting wars against Tsarists and imperialists and literal Nazis. Of course people died. Like, the lesson there shouldn't be communism doesn't work because one guy died one time. It should be look at the lengths that imperialist capitalism is willing to go in order to defeat a system that is merely standing up and saying a person who does a day of work should be paid for a day of work. Like, look at the lengths that the capitalists are willing to go to convince you that a system that fundamentally just says, hey, if a system is in place, it should take responsibility for its citizens and provide basic necessities. And if it can't provide those basic necessities, then it's an illegitimate system. Well, that's a threat to a society that's withholding resources. That if your society is structured to withhold resources, that's a major threat. So it has to be destroyed in the most violent way imaginable. My favorite thing about when people get talking about the Soviet Union is how, like, literally anything the Soviets do is like, oh my God, it shows you that the entire system of communism is a complete and total failure, 100%, it doesn't work at all, oh my God, it's a total failure. The Nazis were capitalists. They came out of capitalism. The dark heart of capitalism, Europe. They sprung out from capitalism and they destroyed Europe, destroyed the Soviets, were defeated ultimately by the Soviets, murdered 25 million of them, and we're all just supposed to be like, that's fine. We gave them a name. They were the Nazis. They weren't capitalists. They were capitalists. They were funded by capitalists. Henry Ford was the one who gave the Nazis the engines to run their machines. And the Nazis rewarded him with the Iron Cross. The Nazis were capitalists. Doesn't seem to scan. Nobody seems to give a shit. That capitalists can literally vomit out an army that goes around massacring 25 million Russians, let alone everybody else, commit a Holocaust, burn everybody down, but capitalism's the greatest system that's ever been a system. There's no flaws whatsoever, and the flaws that they have, you just gotta live with them, human nature. The Soviets literally, have a little stumble, a little bureaucratic mistake that they rush around to try to figure out, dealing with a natural disaster, and everybody's like, that's the entire system of communism fails on 100 billion people, go iPhone. Like, we're demented. That's fucking demented. That's a demented worldview that basically hand waves away the Nazis and hyper focuses in on a culture attempting to deal with its circumstances. Like, that's fucking crazy. So you think the Holodomor is false? Yes, I think that it is Nazi propaganda. Here's my argument. Completely, Jacob. When genocides occur, they happen in the open. The people who commit them are very vocal about it. The people who experience them are very vocal about it. There is no such thing as a secret genocide. As the Palestinian genocide is occurring, as the Gazan genocide is occurring, the Israeli government has been very vocal about it. They have made speeches. They have released planning documents. When the Nazis rounded up the Jews, they made speeches about it. They released planning documents. At the Nuremberg trials, there were confessions. When the residential school system happened in Canada, they voted on it in Parliament. There were speeches. When the United States committed a genocide against the First Nations people, they were open about it. There were speeches. When they enslaved the black population, they were open about it. There were speeches. Where are Stalin's speeches? Where are any Soviet bureaucrat speeches about committing an intentional genocide in Ukraine? Where is any Ukrainian official talking about the intentional genocide that they are experiencing at the hands of the Soviet Union? Where is a single person outside of a Nazi saying this is a genocide being perpetrated on us by the Soviets? If it was a genocide, it's a touch odd that in World War II, the second largest cohort that fought along the Soviets were Ukrainians. Touch odd. That what actually happened is that a natural disaster occurred. Famines occur in time, especially in a famine-stricken area, in a place that had experienced famines previously. And all of the evidence we have shows very plainly that the Soviets were rushing around trying to deal with it. And in fact, they wrote documents about, well, what mistakes did we make? How did we exacerbate this situation? How could we have done this better? Where are the speeches? And if you can't show me the speeches, if you can't show me anybody even talking about it, then I don't give a fuck. Makes sense they weren't open, but is that enough? Yes. Actually supposed to be hidden. For example, Nazi Germany attempted to not let people know what went on in the concentration camps, but they let you know about the concentration camps. Like, come on, man. Like, there were speeches. Like, it was very open. Like, this is the thing that I find very gobsmacking about this conversation, right? About the weird sort of apologetics surrounding this particular issue. Is that it's obvious. Like, it's really, really obvious that all you're doing is struggling with this whole idea that, well, my media wouldn't lie to me about something like that, would it? Yeah, they would. Yeah, they would. They for sure would. Your entire media apparatus is attempting to lie to you right now about the genocide that's happening in Gaza. Like, when the pictures were released, people were shocked by the things they'd done. Yeah, clueless people. Like, people who didn't know what the fuck was happening. Right? Because there's, like, especially in the 40s and 50s, there's, like, gatekeeping at a massive, massive level. Like, the concentration camps that were in Germany were not a secret. Like, they just fucking weren't. Like, Hitler talked about them. Now, there's a difference between turning a blind eye and not paying attention and but that doesn't prevent the event from occurring. Like just because you didn't hear the tree doesn't mean it didn't fall over. Like, and you're telling me that the largest economy, the most powerful economy, and the most powerful military, arguably the most powerful bureaucracy on the planet at the time, didn't keep notes. It's just beyond belief. I just can't tolerate this idea. Exterminating millions of people is a major cultural project. It is a major endeavor. You don't just do it. You don't just slip around. People don't just start doing a genocide. What are they, psychics? Not one scrap of paper, not one line written, not one line uttered. Not from Stalin, not from anybody else. Like, you might as well be asking me to believe that angels are real. No evidence. I am not obligated to believe your claim. Yeah, and the fact that all the evidence is leading back to literal Nazis is very telling. And again, here, Jacob, I'm so confident in this position. Like, you go find Stalin's speeches. You go find the planning documents. And there's always planning documents. When apartheid South Africa was happening, planning documents, very open. When the Rwandan genocide was happening, planning documents, very open. When the Americans committed a genocide in Indonesia, planning documents, very open. There is no such thing as a secret genocide. It cannot happen. It is ridiculous to claim that it could. What are the Soviets gods? They have the ability to mobilize millions of pounds of grain. They have the ability to mobilize millions of people. They have the ability to strip from the Ukrainian people hundreds of thousands of pounds of grain without a military response. What are they, gods? How did they do that? What evidence do you have to show that they did that? The more you pick at this, the more crazy it gets. The more insane it gets. The more ludicrous the claims become. There are people who believe the Jewish genocide didn't happen, and we have pictures. Like, if your defense is that there are lunatics, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, yes, there are people who think angels are real, so doesn't mean I need to tolerate them. Yeah, even with pictures, we have Nazi genocide denial. Imagine without pictures. Okay, we still have the speeches. We have the confessions. Like, I don't really understand what your point is. Like, is your point that there are lunatics who deny the existence of the Holocaust in spite of the evidence? Like, yeah. My goal is to parse between what is real and what is false. And if the argument is that there are some people who are lunatics, okay. Well, my goal is to parse between what is real and what is false. And I don't even understand why you're talking about pictures. I've never even mentioned pictures. That what convinces me? You want to convince me. Okay. I would like to see a single document from any organization within the Soviet Union or a single speech given by anyone in the Soviet Union or in Ukraine that even discusses, talks about, mentions, or organizes even the concept of committing a genocide in Ukraine. One. If you cannot meet this extremely low bar, I am not obligated to believe your fucking narrative. Just because a bunch of Nazis said so just because the CIA says so doesn't mean a goddamn thing. Where are the speeches? Where are the planning documents? Where is the opposition? That one's the most damning of all, by the way. Because maybe you can deceive yourself and fall into a delusional headspace that the Soviets somehow magically did organize a genocide psychically, with no planning documents, with no speeches, that they mobilized millions of people in order to get grain out of Ukraine in order to commit an intentional genocide. Where's the opposition? We may not have pictures of the Holodomor, but plenty of historians have agreed on it. I'm sure that there are plenty of Nazis and fascists who agree on it. I have given you my standard. Like, you can go read Anne Applebaum's Red Famine. You can go read some fraud giving a lecture about something. I make my decisions based on evidence. And the most persuasive thinkers and speakers are the ones who use evidence. And I've given you a very clear standard of what my evidence is, with multiple examples from major events that show that that standard is completely reasonable. And if you're not going to provide evidence, I don't give a fuck what these people say. I don't care what the CIA says. I don't care what they have to say. What's the evidence? And moreover, what makes this conversation exceptionally embarrassing is that this evidence would be easy to provide. It would not be hard. It would, in fact, be the number one thing that if it existed, it would be the easiest thing to find. It would be the first thing that you would do a search and you would get a Stalin quote. It would be the first thing that would happen. But you don't. Why not? Interesting that. The system of capital generates propagandists on purpose, specifically to spread around this bullshit. The CIA is a multi-billion-dollar organization that, by its own admission, exists. To deceive the public. You gonna sit, buddy? There you go. It either really didn't happen. Well, this is the thing that makes it muddy, and this is the thing people get lost in, okay? Is that the famine did happen. Right? The famine definitely happened. That is inarguable. We've got lots of evidence to show that the famine happened. Specifically, the Soviets talking about the famine. Right? The Ukrainians talking about the famine. Like, that's right in line, by the way, with the evidence I should expect to see in terms of a genocide. Really weird that the Soviets would be talking about a famine and that the Ukrainians would be talking about a famine, but nobody's talking about a genocide. Really weird. Oh my goodness, a gigantic famine. We need to do something about it. Holy cow, get grain on the train. Oh, we got to make sure that we account for all that grain. Just get the grain out of there. Hunger can't wait. Go, 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 go. Lots of documents showing that. Lots of documents showing that. Lots of evidence showing that. Yeah. Realizing the lie is the biggest and hardest pill to swallow. Realizing the lie is the biggest and hardest pill to swallow, especially as someone who grew up in the West. Well, and what you're confronting is the reason why it's so tough to swallow is that the lie is so egregious, it's so flagrant, it's so psychopathic, that the reason why you resist it is that to believe it means that you have to lose faith in your own institutions. That's the reason. That for me, I've already lost faith in Western institutions. I have no faith in these institutions. I don't think that they can generate anything but hardship for the people that suffer under them. That the only time they've done anything but was through hard work on the ground by trade unionists, socialists, and communists. And people want to believe in the same way that people want to believe that their father is invincible. In the same way that people want to believe that their father is invincible, that their parents are infallible. People want to believe that their country exists to do good. And that a big part of growing up, what makes a man and what makes a woman, what makes a person an adult, finally, in my view, is the admission that your parent is not a god, nor are they a demon. That they are ultimately just another fucking monkey dealing with the situation that they've been dealt. Probably badly. And most of the time, the conclusion is that they tried their best. When you reach that conclusion, then you're a fucking adult. And if your parent was walking around foaming at the mouth, stabbing people in the back and stealing all their shit, and you didn't acknowledge it or refused to acknowledge it, then I don't think you can be called a grown-up. So too is it with your country. We want to believe that the nation is good. We want to believe that we are attempting to do good. We want to believe that the people who rule us and govern us might make mistakes. It's why the George W. Bush war of aggression on Iraq, it's been so easy to sell to the American people that it was a strategic blunder or a mistake, instead of a war of aggression by a fucking fascist. Because people want to believe that George Bush meant well. He meant well. He certainly isn't a psychopathic mass murderer who's running a grift on us every time he goes out in public to talk, who literally got away with killing 1 million people and now goes and rapes children on his fucking ranch. Like, the hardest pill to swallow about the United States, the hardest pill to swallow about the United States is that the system, not simply the people, but the system that governs it, is psychopathic. It rewards psychopaths, it's governed by psychopaths, and it runs like a psychopath. And that psychopath, as you learn more and more and more, there's no bottom to it. There's absolutely no bottom. There is no lie they will not tell. There is no lie they will not pursue. There is nothing off the table. So when you hear something like, oh my goodness, the Soviets committed a genocide coming out of the system of propaganda, you should immediately be skeptical as fuck. Bex writes, if you want a good academic source on Holodomor, Mark B. Toggers has already debunked the man-made famine theory in his Natural Disaster and Human Actions in the Soviet Famine, 1931 to 1933. Yeah, if you want to do like a big deep dive, and actually I might, like, look, I just think that it's easier to just simply say there's no evidence. Like, there just isn't. Like what's the evidence for this? Natural disaster and human actions in the Soviet famine. Well, that should be good. Boink. Exhale says, I like your content already. I like you already, bud. It's nice. We got a new person in the chat. That's great. So it's so nice to see new people in the chat, I gotta tell you. I feel like they must have lifted a shadow ban on me recently, because I'm actually getting new people in the chat all of a sudden. Ooh, it's got the flippy pages and everything. And book marked. I might actually, you know what? I'm gonna one up this. We're gonna go all the way to the beginning and then go click, copy into the Discord, into resources, and into resources. Perfect. Thank you for that one, Bex. That was very handy. No, I don't know what this is. Yeah, your donation. Yeah, Internet Archive. It's nice. It's nice. The captain. Oh, well, technically, the C4 Putin. The captain on Twitch. How you doing, bud? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well out there. Oh, you know what, guys? I have to pee again. I thought I could hold it until the end, but I can't. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. Okay. Oh, sorry, guys. Twice in one stream. That's lame. Yeah, caffeine does that. So Jacob writes, but do you think America does the things they do because it's America or because it's capitalism that's making America as a good country act a certain way? I mean, America is born of capitalism. I don't think that you can extract those two concepts. I think that one is the other and the other is one, right? Like that America is the imperial core of capitalism. And I just don't think you'll ever, like, capitalism. I've already talked about this. I don't think you were in the room when I was talking about this, Jacob, but like America is going to have to and likely will go through a period of breaking up. That the United States, as the empire recedes and as the empire becomes incapable of dealing with itself, the states are going to break apart. That you're going to have a general independence movement. What that's going to look like, but it is the most likely thing that's going to happen throughout all human history. Every single time any empire declines and breaks apart, it breaks apart. That's what the British Empire did. That's what the Chinese empires have done. That's what the Indian empires have done. That's what the any European empire has always done. Alexander the Great's empire, Genghis Khan's empire, the Roman Empire, right? That once empires fall into decline, the next thing that happens is that they begin to break apart. And I don't think much is going to happen until after that occurs. Which is why I say that you need to organize your politics locally and stop thinking nationally about your politics. Because national politics is basically dead. It's not going to go anywhere. Jacob writes, America, if it really is a great democracy and becomes progressive, as it can, nope, it can't, but okay. It could eventually, if people get educated, okay. Good luck on that. And the communists in the country have a good argument and a position to defend. No, I think that it's possible that communists will take over pockets. Like, I think Seattle, Washington is the most likely place. This whole section right here is already fairly left-leaning in inclination. It views itself fairly left-leaning, and it's fairly sympathetic to communists. So I think that there, and I think that there are other states. I think that there are, especially Midwestern states, where it could go that way. You think about something like Maine, right? Maine, Vermont, right? Completely possible that it goes that way. You'll have pockets of it. But Florida is already fascist, right? Like it's not even pretending, right? Texas is hard right. Like maybe not fascist, but definitely hard right. It's very unlikely that there is going to be a solution that comes through the system of electoral politics. And the primary reason for that, Jacob, the primary reason why electoral politics will not be the solution is because the system of electoral politics exists to exclude people who are pursuing the solution. We saw that with Bernie Sanders. That the Democratic Party has a superdelegate system that purposefully excludes people who are considered to be too far to the left. Right? So if you are to the left of Bernie Sanders, you're simply not going to get anywhere. And that's baked into the system. Oh, yeah, the Gusanos. Yeah. I mean, Bolsonaro lives there now, too. Things like the Holodomor, hunger, and the mass common sense of communism as a dangerous failed system still exists. I'm probably affected by it and its propaganda. Yeah, we all are. Right? It takes a lot of effort to shake it. It takes a lot of effort to shake it. And OK Life says, a fellow Canadian commie, let's go. Casey, right? Trump, we need so bad 2024. Good to see you, my friend. I have not listened to Tom McDonald. Casey Lee writes, Bernie made a good run at it, though. It's possible a Bernie-like candidate can win the presidency, in my opinion. It is not. The way the Democratic Party is structured is that there is what's called a superdelegate system. It's literally what it's called. The superdelegates are unelected, appointed officials from within the party apparatus itself, who are there to specifically to vet people like Bernie Sanders out of the primary. It's what they're there to do. And so if you are Bernie Sanders or even slightly to the left of Bernie Sanders, you will never become the leader of the Democratic Party. It just will not happen. It's designed that way on purpose. It's been that way since Roosevelt. It's the reason why they did it, to make sure that they never got another Roosevelt. Possible, yeah, likely, not anytime soon. Well, look, and given the configuration, given the culture of how things are, if there was suddenly this big upswell of communist rhetoric and this big upswell, like, the system will respond to that. It's not just going to be like, oh, there's a bunch of communists all of a sudden. Well, better listen to what these guys have to say. Tell me, Mr. Communist, what is it that you think? You know, like, Piers Morgan's not going to do big interviews. Like, you're not going to see Tucker Carlson. Well, maybe Tucker now, but you're not going to see, like, the big mainstream press actually dealing with and talking about communists. Like, the only time that they'll actually talk about communists is in order to do what they've always done, which is to make them look bad, right? And frankly, if communists manage to come in and, like, sweep in and take power, what you think the fascists are just going to be like, okay, well, I guess that's normal. That's a normal thing. Like, if the communists were to actually do what communists want to do, it would destroy the country. Like, the United States is a very large country. Like, each one of the, like, take a look at Texas. Okay, just look at Texas. Okay, Texas. That's Texas. France. Germany. Right? Germany. Texas. Okay? Think about, like, World War II, the Nazis, that whole catastrophe, like, all of the stuff that we were all taught and all that kind of stuff, that all came out of Germany. Well, there's Texas. And Europe can literally, like, fit in this section of America. So there's this much more. It's really, 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 really not going to happen. Like, it's really not going to happen. And I reiterate, and I say it again, and the only reason I talk this way is not to, I say this not to spread despair or to have us fall into nihilism, but for us to stare at it with a lot more realism, and to organize appropriately. The most likely thing that happens when empires fall is that they break apart. It's a total truism. It's almost a complete fact. No, it's not. I said the word almost. No, it's a complete fact of empires falling. It was true when the British Empire fell. It was true when the Roman Empire fell. It was true when the Indian empires rose and fell and rose and fell. Same with China, rose and fell and rose and fell. The Mongolians, Alexander the Great, the African empires that existed through time, right? I mean, the Aztecs and all of these guys are a bit unique given the colonial period and how that ended for them. But, like, when empires fall, the provinces that make them up, and it begins with the external provinces, with the colonies, right? Like, with the British Empire, it really began with the colonies. India, right? It's a big one. When empires fall, they break apart. There is exactly a 0% chance that the United States is going to stay together as state organizations, as a United States. And it's going to be for a very simple, very straightforward reason. People are going to look at their paycheck. They're going to say, hey, this line right here that says federal taxes, what am I getting for that? The answer is nothing. You're getting a big fuck you. There will come a moment, sooner than you like, where the rulers of America are going to have to pay some bills, and they don't have a functional tax base anymore because they ship their manufacturing base overseas. And so they're going to be forced to turn to the rich, to the wealthy class, and raise their taxes. And instead of the wealthy paying those taxes, the wealthy are going to fund independent movements. They're going to turn to people within each state. So imagine Elon Musk in Texas. Elon Musk in Texas turns to the people of Texas and goes, "Taxes are theft." And the people go, "Taxes are theft. We should get out of this arrangement with this federal government. We should start our own country, and we need to run the and everybody votes on it, and they declare themselves an independent country. And if you think that that can't happen, everybody remember Brexit? Everybody remember that? Most states already have an inclination to declare independence from the United States of about 30%, including in democratic states. That independence movements are bubbling directly under the surface. That it's not going to take a big dramatic event for people to begin supporting that kind of a thing. And it's not going to, all it will really take is the chickens coming home to roost on the American empire and the bills needing to be paid. And the capitalists will do as they've always done. I don't want to pay for any of that. So I'm just going to bounce. Muscovia sounds horrible, yeah. Baked Potato, good to see you. Yeah, that's right, Baked Potato. You're too dangerous. You're a dangerous man, Baked Potato. We can all tell. You should have been a fried potato. And OK Life writes, would you allow me to paint out an ideal situation here of empires falling? With many countries starting to gain wealth and having opportunities to build up and get militaries, I imagine empires will lose power. And in place, unions such as the EU will be established in various parts of each continent. And we'll have an Asian trade union, an African one of the for the Americas. Yeah, I think that that's likely. Like that's what's sort of being discussed in the rest of the world is a unipolar world, right? And that China has set itself up to be kind of the heart of a fairly large trade organization. That they're building institutions that are separate from the United States. Honestly, I think that the next generation is the story of the next generation, like the story of the previous generation that we are now sort of living in, is the rise of China. The rise of China is an incredible and amazing story. Powerful and beautiful. Absolutely brilliant. That the story for the next generation in terms of China is how is it going to pivot itself? That it's at a real crossroads right now. It's at a real crossroads right now. And there's a lot of people, and I think most people who are rooting for China are hopeful that China will take the appropriate path, that they won't follow the United States path, that they will follow their own path. You've got Xi Jinping calling for a reinforcement of Marxist principles being taught in universities. You've got more people acknowledging that the American system of capital isn't all it's cracked up to be, that it has big flaws. And so you've got a country who has accumulated a lot of prosperity for itself that is on the precipice of facing an interesting cultural reformation moment. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And I think that Xi Jinping stating outright that there should be a reinforcement of Marxism in universities is a sign, is an indication of which direction China is going to move in. But the story for the next generation is going to be the rise of federated bodies in both Africa and Latin America. There's a bunch of countries in Latin America that are already talking about creating federated bodies and federated currencies. And there are the beginnings of rumblings, right? Libya under Gaddafi, that's what he was attempting to do. That's why they had to take him out, right? So another Gaddafi will likely appear, uh, uh, and and a unified, not a unified Africa, obviously, but a federated body within Africa is likely to form. Uh, and of course, their relationship with China, right? There's skepticism within Africa, rightfully. I think the Africans are right to be skeptical of China, but I do also think that the relationship between Africa and China will be healthier than the relationship between the United States and Africa. Uh, and so you could see in Africa over the next 50 years experience a lot of prosperity, and it could happen very quickly. So that's what I'll keep my eye on. And so I think your observations are correct, Anauke. I think that America receding on the world stage, America being depowered, losing a lot, being isolated. What seems to be happening is that America is being isolated. I don't know why, but this is the most I can zoom this out all of a sudden. I can only zoom it out to here. I can't get the big world picture anymore. I don't know why. Google Maps. Solve my problems, Google Maps. Yeah. That's as far as it can go. Oh well. The captain writes, I live in Africa. Where do you live, bud? You don't need to answer that if you don't want. In East Africa. Oh yeah, I suspect there is. Like a lot of, there has been immigration along here for sure. I mean, China has like 1.5 billion people, right? Like, so it's hardly surprising that they're going all over the place and they're taking over the world. They're taking over the world. 2 African countries are more developed than some European countries, Botswana and Gabon. They're trying to become imperialists. Yeah, that's also interesting, right, Jacob? Like, that could definitely happen, right? You could definitely just have, like, petty empires, right? For sure. Like we love to talk about this as if it's like, and Chad and Sudan and Egypt and Libya will talk and discuss amongst themselves and come to an agreement and live in peace and harmony with one another. Or it's just like literally Botswana is just like, yeah, we trained a bunch of people and we took over Zimbabwe. What are you going to do? like for sure. I heard Zizek say that the lessons learned from the West was fascism, that they might go that way. I would be very surprised to see China take that tactic. That a turn to fascism, it's possible. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying that China is infallible and that it's not going to turn that way. But I just don't like I'd like to know what the evidence is for that claim. Like, I'm open to it because I think that we should have a skeptical eye towards China. Like, I don't think that we should just be like rabid full supporters. And China is perfectly capable of doing all kinds of shitty things. It's absolutely possible. But the West is also saying things like there's a genocide happening in Xinjiang, right? Like, the West is trying to convince us that China is committing this big atrocity in Xinjiang with, like, the photographs of the tops of buildings that they then send camera crews in and capture nothing. Like, that's my favorite. I actually did a video about this. There's a BBC documentary where they sent a film crew into one of these prisons, into one of these, like, they're genocide, they're culturally cleansing the people. And so the Chinese invited this BBC film crew in. The BBC film crew went into one of these places, filmed everything, had a bunch of interviews with people, and then set up a camera. This was my favorite part. Like, right near the end, they set up a camera on the outside of the complex, and what they caught on footage and showed it was that at the end of the day, all of the prisoners left. They walked out of the building and walked into the city. Like, there were security measures because it's a security, like, there's security concerns, obviously. But like, what kind of genocide is it, and what kind of ethnic cleansing are we talking about, where the people who are being taught at the schools then walk out of the building and walk into the town? Huge genocide. Meanwhile, there's like, Gaza is literally rubble, electricity cut off, no water. Like, so if that's the lie that the West is, if those are the lies that the West is willing to tell about China, then we should be extremely skeptical of anything the West has to say about China. We should be deeply, 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 deeply skeptical. Because if they're willing to lie about that, they're willing to lie about anything. Yeah, it's the same story, Jacob. There's no such thing as a secret genocide. Show me the speeches. Show me the planning documents. Show me any evidence. Anything. Like, outside of like one random person being like, yes, I was kidnapped and put into a facility. I'm certainly not a CIA spook. Like, it's really funny how America, after literally murdering a million Muslims in Iraq, occupying Afghanistan for 20 years, committing atrocity after atrocity against Muslims, literally a country that has enacted a Muslim ban, currently now committing an ethnic cleansing of who? Muslims, is now supposed to be, we're supposed to be convinced that these guys are really, really concerned about Muslims in China. That's a no from me, dog. Like, that's a no from me. Under no circumstances. One of my favorite things to do when I get talking about this is go to YouTube, right? China walk around Xinjiang. China walk around Xinjiang. Do 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 do. Let's do this one. This is something I love to do. I haven't really been doing it very recently. One of the things that I think is important to do if you are going to talk about or think about a country is to look at that country. I don't mean like read about it in the National Post or read about what the CIA has to say about that country. I mean, go to the country. There's a million travel vlogs, like a million bazillion. You can see a ton of this stuff, right? Here's a walk around video of Xinjiang, where this supposed genocide is happening. What's happening in Xinjiang is very clear. Okay? Here, I'm gonna pause this video for 1 second just so I can show you the map so that you can get a real sense. Here's Afghanistan. Did something happen in Afghanistan over the last 20 years? What happened in Afghanistan in the last 20 years, do you think? Oh, yeah, right, the American occupation. Right. Where literally CIA agents were walking around the streets of Kabul just shooting people in the streets. Right? That's not hyperbole. I'm not just talking shit about that. CIA shooting Afghanis in the streets. Afghanistan report. CIA-backed Afghan troops. They've shot men like this. Abusive night raids by CIA. CIA-backed Afghan force. Yeah, Afghanistan, CIA-backed forces commit atrocities. Right? Atrocities pile up for CIA-backed Afghan paramilitary troop. So literally the CIA walking around just shooting people in the streets of Afghanistan, right? So what does this do? What does this whole thing do? Well, it creates a refugee crisis, right? Another reason why I'm very skeptical of many of the narratives about like disasters that get blamed on communism. Where are the refugee crises most of the time? So Afghani people fleeing into Pakistan, which increases tensions here. Afghani people wanting to flee into Iran, but Iran's like, nah, fuck off, right? Turkmenistan, right? They're flooding. You know where else they flood? They go right through the Wakhan corridor, boop ba doo, and they end up in the hills of Xinjiang. Dink. Right? So you got a whole bunch of Muslim refugees fleeing an American disaster into all of the countries around them, and many of them end up Kagar Prefecture in Xinjiang. This is a mountain range, right? Like, they end up in the hills. And so we know how, like, Muslim fundamentalists are, right? Like, we know of what mind a lot of these guys can be like, right? The whole, like, I'm going to kill a bunch of people for virgins in heaven thing is not just a meme. There are a lot of these people who exist. More specifically, there is an organization that used to be designated a terrorist organization by the United States called the East Independent... the East Turkmenistan Independence Movement, I believe is the name of it. And I'm sure one of my regulars is going to correct me, which thank you if you do. This was an Islamic terrorist organization along the same level as like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, right? That existed in Xinjiang. And their goal was to fight for Islamic independence of the Xinjiang region from China. And so they would commit they were committing series of terrorist acts within Xinjiang, right? Most famously, and I think this is the one that really has stuck out in my mind because of the scale and the grotesqueness of it, was that 10 men at one point stormed into the transit system in Xinjiang with machetes and killed over 100 people. Like, that's a problem, right? If you were living in your town and 10 men stormed into your subway system and massacred 100 people, you would expect your government to respond to that. And if you didn't expect your government to respond to that, I would think that you were on the side of the people doing the massacring. So just for simple stability and order, you expect increased security measures. But of course, this creates a problem for Xinjiang and for China at large. What do you do about these people? What do you do about the East Turkmenistan independence movement? What do you do about these Muslims who are living in hills? What do you do about a young man who has only ever known war? That he was born in Afghanistan while it was at war. He has lived under a war regime, and he likely fled to the hills of Xinjiang in order to escape the war. He's never had a formal education. He doesn't know anything. All he's ever known is war and religious fundamentalism. Well, what do you do? The American solution is pretty clear, because America actually has a refugee crisis on its own border. The American-Mexican border. They have ICE detention camps, right? You get rounded up by ICE agents, you get rounded up by Border Patrol, and you get taken to one of these detention camps and essentially forgotten about, if you make it there in the first place. With the goal of you being deported back from where you came from. Kamala Harris outright saying, do not come here. Okay, well, that's one way of doing it, I suppose. China has taken a different tactic. They still have detention centers, they still have prisons to deal with this, but they also have centers that are vocational centers. They have centers where these refugees can go to and learn basic skills, which is what the BBC film crew actually captures. That the accusations of ethnic cleansing are a touch odd, given that the people within these facilities were actually being taught in the Uyghur language and being taught how to write in the Uyghur language. They captured all this on film, singing songs in their own language. And what they're being taught is just basic skills so that they can be integrated into the wider Chinese economy. It looks like it's relatively successful, certainly more successful than the alternative. The American press and the American government looks at this strategy and has used it as an opportunity to accuse China of ethnic cleansing, while it literally funds a literal ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And you can see, with your own eyes, this is the province of Xinjiang. Here it is, right here. Where's the genocide? I don't need a satellite photo of the top of a building layered over scary music going, here in this facility they're doing untold horrors that we've never captured on film, even though a film crew went in there. What, you want speeches and evidence? You want a planning document? Evidence. If I were to show you a video of what the Gaza Strip looks like today, do you think it would look like this? The lies the American empire tells are never ending. The captain writes, could I please join your Discord, by the way? Really interesting topics. You join the Discord by donating to my Patreon, the captain. It's $1. I'd love it if you donated more. That would be nice. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. As normal. Most importantly, tell your friends, tell your wives, tell the world. But I have put one little checkpoint. The only checkpoint that I actually have in any of my operations is that I put up I do ask that people donate to get into the Discord, and I essentially do that to vet. To just keep the Nazis out. The captain writes, we'll do that, thank you. Well, thank you, sir, I appreciate that. I look forward to it. Well, this is a great time. This is a good time to, good to see you. Shadow Man, I know that you're baked potato. The Shadow Man, avoiding the shadow ban. Hilarious. Firefox and uBlock add-on to watch YouTube without ads, by the way. Yeah, I don't know, Vestland. It's all very fussy to me. You're going to find, if you hang out with me for any length of time, you'll find that fussiness. I don't care for fussiness. Try to stay away from fussiness. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to end the stream. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being. walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.